Yeah. Hey. All right. Hey. Yeah, I mean.
So we about to take off.
Hey. Please do remain calm. About to run the game, spitting with a little bit of soul, no times.
Welcome to Please Remain Calm. I'm Ben Gonzalez.
And I am Daniel Gonzalez. As always, folks, the opinions expressed here on the Please Remain Calm podcast are our own. They do not reflect the opinions of the Los Angeles City Fire Department or the Los Angeles County Department of Health Services.
Thank you. And that being said, our new merch has finally arrived. I adjusted the mic.
Jesus.
It makes a noise, all right? We have a new thing in the studio right now. The mic is now like wall mounted, which is awesome because you might have noticed like in other episodes I'm like futzing with the mic stand.
You do have to adjust it though, dude. It's like pointing down at your chin.
I know, but
let's
it's
knock it
like,
out. Yeah, I know, but knock it out right now so you don't.
Yeah,
there you go.
so we'll get this out of the way. That'll be the last time you hear the of me adjusting the mic. All right. So now the new merch has arrived.
We do have new
Big
merch.
announcement. You can see Danny wearing it.
New t-shirts.
I can hold one up. I didn't put it on yet, but yeah, finally, after the long wait, it's been months.
It has been months.
Yeah, we sold out. These were hot shirts, the first run.
Yeah.
Now in color.
In color with
and
our
no
new
mask.
with our new logo.
And no mask. Yeah.
So we're setting up a Shopify account to just make ordering these things easier for you guys. So give us a couple days to get that set up, and then these t-shirts will be available with some stickers and magnets and whatnot if you want to help support the podcast. Again, guys, thank you so much for sharing and supporting the podcast. Every time I open up any of our socials or the YouTube or anything, we have more subscribers, we have more views. People are looking at and watching and listening old episodes too. So we really appreciate you guys sharing the podcast and telling your friends about it. Please continue to do so. If you guys are listening for the first time today, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button on the episodes you listen to. All that stuff helps our analytics and helps us kind of grow as a podcast. So we really appreciate it. And we hope to keep bringing you guys some great episodes like the episode we have today.
Yeah, we've got another good one today. We have another guest in the studio today. We've been kind of going like off and on. Guests, no guests.
Well,
guests,
that's working
no
out.
guests.
That's working out okay for me, man.
Yeah, you know what I mean? We've still been able to knock out some good shows when it's just us. But people like our format of having somebody come in and tell us a story.
And you know, the things we're talking about are fairly serious life events that have happened to people. You know what I mean? So like for us, and I always tell like rookies this too, man, like you show up to a call, man, it might be your fifth chest pain or maybe your second, you know, if you're working in a busy spot, you know, 33, 64, it might be your second or third fire of the day, you know? So it after a while it becomes routine. You got to remember that these are serious events that are happening to these people. You know what I mean? So like getting guests, it's like, there's plenty of people that we know that have had things happen in their lives, but a lot of times you'll hit people up and they just don't, you know, it's not something that they want to revisit. It's not something
they're not ready for it.
about.
Yeah.
And so, you know, it's always kind of a sensitive subject, and Roger and I are friends. And so I broached the subject to him. This is, our guest today is, my friend, LA Fire Department Inspector, Roger Sakharov. Say hi, Raj.
Hi there. Nice to meet you.
Yeah, thanks for doing the show.
Raj and I, met years ago at Fours. We worked a day together at Fours on the rescue and got to know each other, and then kind of didn't see each other for a while, and wound up at 63s together in Venice. And Roger's a firefighter, really well-rounded firefighter. And you know, man, when you work together with the same crew for a long time, you really get to know each other and get to know each other's families and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get into like the main reason that we're here, the main story that we're gonna talk about is your son Jesse, and the ordeal that you guys have gone through over the past few years. I always kind of like to ask guys and gals that come in here that are firefighters, just kind of start from the beginning and tell me how the like spark of even becoming a firefighter even started with you.
Yeah, sure. Well, first I want to actually correct you because we've actually known each other way longer than that. So when I was a little baby, tiny paramedic, we worked together in Battalion 13.
Dang.
And then after that,
that's all a blur to me.
It's all a blur. And then after that, I was in Battalion 11 when you were in Battalion 18. So we used to run into each other all the time.
Okay.
At 61. So
yeah.
We've known each other quite a long time. But obviously at Fours, we
spent
more time together. But anyway, yeah. So my story is a little bit probably more unusual than some you get. I'm actually born and raised in New York. I was born in Brooklyn. And when I grew up, I don't have all those fun stories about how I always wanted to be a fireman. And there's a picture of me, playing in a fire engine and all that stuff. I actually thought for the most part, I was going to be a lawyer.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. So I went to college.
Like you wore a tie and took a briefcase to school?
I did wear like collared shirts to high school because I was that guy.
Nice.
I was like,
Nice.
I'm a serious student.
Were there lawyers in your family or?
No, my family was like blue collar. My dad was a mechanic. And I was kind of, I was supposed to be the guy who was going to go and do like
okay.
Roger was the first in our family.
basically, yeah, that was me. I was going to be that guy. So I went to school in Binghamton, which is like our version, New York's version, and kind of UCLA. It's kind of a good state school.
Okay.
And then I was pre-law, and I was going to go to law school. So after school, I was going to take some time off, earn some money, whatever. And I worked. My first job after college, I worked in the World Trade Center on the 64th floor at a law firm.
Oh, no shit.
Yeah,
No
so
way.
I worked there in 99 and 2000.
Oh, man.
Yeah. So I left that job. I ended up going to work for the NHL, which was my dream job. I wasn't doing legal assistant stuff anymore. I had transitioned into internet stuff.
And you're how old?
Oh,
at
I thought
this
you were
point?
going to be a hockey player.
No,
Dream job. I gave it all up.
No,
Happy
no.
Gilmore style.
While I was doing that job, I found out that most lawyers don't like their jobs.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a rude awakening. And I was like, everyone around me was really unhappy.
Yeah.
And so it was a negative motivation. Why would I want to do this when everyone around me is really unhappy?
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Dude, I talk about that all the time, or tell my boys that all the time too. Like, because we'll have that conversation. Like, what do you want to be? What do you think you want to be or do when you grow up or whatever?
Yeah.
And it all boils down to like the most important thing is that you're doing something that makes you happy.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how much money you're making, man. If you're unhappy doing something, your life's going to be miserable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's hard though to come to that realization after college.
Yes.
Like when you're doing it.
Yeah, because that's what my path was supposed to be.
Yeah.
So luckily for me, one of my best friends in college had gotten into the internet, developing websites back when that was all voodoo and no one really knew what that meant.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I remember thinking like, I can't do this law thing. What am I going to do? And my friend's like, I can teach you how to do web stuff. And I was like, I can't do that. He's like, I can teach a monkey how to do that. And I was like, I'm your monkey. So he taught me how to do that. And then I just got really lucky and I got a job working at the NHL. And as a hockey guy, this was like a big dream for me.
Yeah. You grew up playing hockey?
I didn't grow up playing hockey, but I grew up playing roller hockey,
Yeah.
which, that's what my parents could afford.
Yeah, sure.
But I was a big hockey fan. So I remember when I walked in for my interview, you're just walking through the office and the Stanley Cup was sitting on a table.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Just sitting there. Nobody.
And a single tear
And
dripped
I'm
down
just
Roger's
like,
side.
is that and they're like, oh, you can see that after the interview. I was like, okay.
It's
Right.
just sitting there.
So I was lucky enough I got hired in that job, and I did that for pretty much almost 2 years. And that's if you're in sports,
Mm-hmm.
you quickly understand that it's a full effort job. All hours. I was working more than 100 hours a week.
Oh,
You're on
wow.
call
This
for
was
everything.
doing
Yeah, doing
internet
what
stuff
exactly?
for
This
the
was
NHL.
We were like putting breaking news on the internet back when that was harder than doing it on your iPhone.
Yeah.
Right.
It involved like coding. Like
Yeah.
actually somebody would give you something, you'd have to code it and put it on the internet.
What a crazy time to be alive, huh, dude?
It was really crazy. It was wacky.
What was the biggest story you remember breaking in your era with
the
NHL?
biggest story was back in the day when Jaromir Jagr got traded to the Capitals. That was a big deal. He was like the best
Damn,
player in
that's
hockey,
right.
and he got traded, and it
And
was a
you're in
big
there
deal.
like Zuckerberg, just trying to
yeah. So
code it all out.
So that was it was a full commitment job where they're working long hours. You had to be on call all the time. People were always calling you saying, "Oh, this is going to go down," and you knew about it ahead of time, or your sources, found out, or sometimes we knew ahead of time, sometimes we didn't. So it was great. It was really fun. But at the same time, that brings me to 2001, and what was it 4 days after I got married, 9/11 happened.
Oh,
Whoa.
man. And you're still in New York at this time.
I was on 51st Street,
Wow.
so it was not very far away, a couple of miles at most.
Man.
Damn.
Yeah. So
4 days after your wedding, huh?
4 days after we had just flown home, got back, I think the day or two before. And
You did a destination wedding? Or you mean from your honeymoon?
no, we just got married, and we didn't
Okay.
end up we did like a wedding moon kind of thing where we
Okay.
just hung out because we got married in Nantucket. So we just
Oh, okay.
hung out and got married and then came home.
Yeah.
And I worked on 51st Street. We lived on 121st Street. So we lived and worked in Manhattan.
Man.
And it was really traumatic as a New Yorker. I mean, I know it's traumatic for everybody, but
When it's home like that,
it's home.
It's a lot
and-
different.
and
Yeah.
New Yorkers are, we're really tough.
Yeah.
And we pride ourselves on being like a tough city. I was thinking about all the different, I was trying to figure out a way to explain that. But one of the funny ways I remember my wife and I, we were on a subway car one time. And back in those days, you used to read the newspaper on the subway, right? Before phones.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember one time we're sitting there reading the newspaper, and you pull into a station, and the doors open, and a couple of these big rats, like subway rats, walk on the
Yeah.
subway car. And they got on, and everyone just had their newspaper, and they just lifted their legs. And then the rats just walked right through the car, and nobody moved. And then we pulled in the next station, and the rat got off.
Rat pulls out a little rat newspaper.
Yeah.
So he had an
Metro
appointment,
card.
and that's just
Yeah.
New York. No one's
Man.
jumping or screaming. They're just like, whatever. That rat's
Yeah.
got something to do
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So 9/11 really shook us, and it really shook, I think, everybody and who they were. So I think it took me a while to recover from the shock of it all.
Yeah.
And then when it kind of sunk in and I had some time to digest it, I kind of reevaluated my life, and I thought, I knew fireman, one of my best friends in high school. He died, and my high school girlfriend, she was on the top floor.
Mm.
So,
Wow.
my buddy, they didn't find anything of them. Their parents had to wait and
Yeah.
decide, are you going to bury an empty coffin? Like the things you never ever want to think about.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. We went to a couple years ago. We did a little DC trip, and then went to New York and went to the memorial there. And it's, I wasn't. It was 2001. I wasn't on the job yet, working private ambulance, and but you're in that world, trying to get on with the explorers and stuff like that. And so I can remember that happening, and like just same thing, man. Just dwelling and nowhere near obviously what you were thinking or going through. But yeah, I can remember driving through downtown and looking at the buildings and going, how, you know what I mean? Like, what if that happened here? Like that could happen here. And then being at Nines, you get all the info in the 411 from different plots and stuff like that were stopped, for things that are happening downtown. It's just something that's like always kind of dwelling in your in the back of your mind, Yeah, God, that's terrible. So that kind of got you considering a change?
Yeah, once that kind of all sunk in, I just had this change in my life where I'm sitting in these meetings and they're talking about, we got to break this story. We got to break this story. It's life and death. If our numbers don't go up, it's life and death.
Yeah.
And for the 2 years before that, I was like, you're
yeah.
right, boss. Let's work harder. Like I'm not going to sleep at all.
Yeah.
And then suddenly I was like, there's still people in that hole. Like this is not life and death. And it was a changing moment for me. And it really affected, how I looked at my job and, how I performed it. And I was still good at my job. It didn't fill my cup. Right.
Yeah, sure, man.
So I looked into the fire department. Obviously they, needed a lot of people at that time. But in New York, they have age limits. And so I didn't qualify because the age cutoff is very strict. At the time it was 27.
Yeah.
Really?
And it was the day you got hired. So they would call you and say, congratulations, your number came up. How old are you? And if it was your birthday, see ya.
Wow.
27
No
one
shit.
day, you're out. So they have civil service tests that run 3 years, and you have to be on that list at the time they pick you. So I was like, okay, well, I guess this isn't the way that I'm going to, change my stuff, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So now fast forward, less interesting, but I ended up moving out here to go work for Fox Sports because there was some labor stuff at the NHL. So I came out here and I was working for Fox Sports covering hockey, baseball, and football.
Okay. As a writer, reporter?
This
or-
was I had gotten and kind of transitioned into like writing and media coverage.
Okay.
A little
Okay.
less from the
Wow.
web stuff. So I was telling someone this story, and I tell them about the fire department stuff, and they go, "Oh, there's no age limits here." So
Yeah.
I go, "Really?"
Yeah.
And they say, "Yeah, there's no age limit."
Just randomly.
Just a completely random
Yeah.
occurrence. I don't even know who it was.
Hmm.
And so I applied, and luckily it was one of those times, kind of like now, we're hiring
Yeah.
a massive amount of people.
Sure.
And about a year later, I was a firefighter.
So crazy how that happens, man. How the
Yeah.
hiring works with
Get
the fire
in at
department too.
just the right time.
It was
Yeah.
So
exactly
this is
right.
like 2003 or
I got
so,
hired
or
in 2007.
2007.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the time I
All right.
actually stepped in, it was August 2007.
Yeah, and when people are listening and they're wondering like that sounds weird that there'd be an age limit to get hired for this job and then it would be 27. I mean, the cities when they hire you, they're looking at the investment that they put into you and how long of a career they want you to work basically.
Yeah.
And if they think that after a certain age, what's the number that they're looking for? Like 30 years out of everybody, more or less?
It's
30, 30,
That's it?
30.
yeah.
Yeah, something like that, right? So if they don't think that they can reasonably get that amount of time out of you,
Yeah.
some places will say it's not worth it. It's
It's all a numbers game, man.
the FAA.
If it don't
I
make dollars,
remember-
don't make sense.
Yeah, I applied to be a air traffic controller, and they had a cutoff with the FAA.
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of training and everything. And I think it was like 31 or 33 or something like that, and you couldn't do it. You couldn't apply. After
Yeah,
that.
it's crazy,
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
So it goes up the ladder, man. It's a trip.
It's so crazy to me how I'm not crazy, but just like eye opening to me how much like traumatic events just shaped me as a person. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or just like crazy things that like how you said it just like changed the way you looked at your job. You know what I mean? Like if you knew me 15 years ago compared to me now, I'm two completely different people. And really a lot of that change has come through trauma in my life, where I went through it, decided that's not the person I wanted or not the thing I wanted to go through, whatever, and changed. So it's a trip to hear you say that. And of course, an event that huge would have an impact on your life like that.
Well, it's funny because, people, when sometimes, you go to a station, you don't know someone, or someone will ask you, well, why did you become a fireman? And I tell them I wanted to change, make an impact in people's lives. And they
Yeah.
say, no, I don't want to hear your interview answer. I want your real answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, you saw a fire truck, or your dad, or your uncle. And I said, no, like, honestly. And I tell them, and they're like, oh,
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
No,
Yeah.
no. I was
Yeah.
literally at 9/11, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the truest story ever. Okay, so now it's 2007.
2007. Yeah.
You're on the job.
Yes.
You're running into him. He has no idea.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is fuck-
He's doing
I'm
the
like,
days.
this
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
New York over here. This
Yeah.
fucking
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah. 9/11. Yeah.
What were your first houses?
So
probation.
just a quick story before that. So the
Yeah.
funny thing is again, our experience diverge, right? So, when we hire all these people and, you get people from all different backgrounds. So my first day in the drill tower, they say, okay, all right, hey, Sakharov, I want you to throw that ladder. And I was like, throw the ladder? And they say, throw the ladder. So I'm looking at it
How
on the
far?
ground, and I'm like, what, like, where do you want me to throw it? Like over there, like on the, how far in the air is it supposed to travel? I had no idea that
Yeah,
meant.
day one.
Actually, yeah, this
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
I had never touched a ladder. I never touched a hose.
That's
Because
funny, man.
I mean, I think I had an EMT card because that was what you needed. But I
Yeah.
took EMT at El Camino or whatever. But
Yeah.
I had no.
No private academy,
Experience,
no nothing,
nothing.
huh? Yeah.
And so it's funny because, I consider myself, like you said, I really appreciate the compliment, but I'm a well-rounded, firefighter at this point in my career, but it took a lot of work.
Sure, yeah.
But it also goes to show you don't have to be this, pre-seasoned,
Yeah.
person with all
On the
this
job
stuff.
training. Yeah.
they
He literally
teach you.
did it.
And it's one of the reasons I like to ask everybody that comes in here what's your story? Everybody has a different story, of how they got to even consider being a firefighter,
Turns out he's more well-rounded than you thought. He's
Yeah, I
covering
know, fuck.
sports
He's
for
like,
Fox
well-
Sports. Yeah. It's like, damn.
Well, I was a mayor of my small town.
Yeah. Right. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's crazy. Okay, so now you're on the job. You're in the mix of, in the lifestyle and the schedule and
Yes.
stuff like that. And you're already married. Had been married. Was that a big change for your wife, like the schedule and stuff like that, or you were already working a shit ton before?
No, I mean, I was working a lot, with my old job, but I think the adjustment was only in so much as her adjusting to the culture of it
Yeah.
rather than anything else.
Yeah.
I laugh, we talk about all the things that are going on in the department these days. And I was a corporate guy for a long time. So I'm used to, I see firefighters do things all the time that I'm like, whoa, you probably shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
Right. But, being in a corporate, I was used to all that. So I'd come home and I'd tell my wife stories about some of the, things guys do at work, which are super fun. Probably no bueno.
Yeah. A little problematic.
Yeah.
So you guys had a couple kids.
Yes. Yeah.
And we're working together at 63s now. So kind of lead us into how you guys even found out that there was an issue with your son, Jesse. He's how old at this point?
Jesse's now, at the time he was 7 and he's 10 now.
Okay. Just kind of start from the beginning. How did he even rear its head?
So when Jesse was 7, he was just a regular kid. He had never been sick before in his whole life, like never been inside a hospital for, any reason like that. He was totally normal in every way. He started to get body pains and it was weird. He would just say, oh, my body hurts. And we thought, everyone always says it's growing pains,
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's a hockey player. So he plays, hockey games and,
sure.
When kids are little and they're playing hockey, they just skate 900 miles an hour in every direction, right?
Right.
Most of the time it's the wrong direction, but they're still skating 900 miles an hour. So all of a sudden he went from that to like skating really slow. And it was weird. And I'd say, hey, like, are you okay? And he'd be like, no, like everything hurts. And I'm like, did you get hit with a puck? Did you fall? He's like, no, it just hurts. And we couldn't figure it out.
Yeah.
So then the way we really knew something was like hit the tipping point was on Halloween that year. He wouldn't trick or treat. He just said, my body hurts too much. So he just sat at home and gave out candy because he couldn't walk around the block.
Wow.
And we're like, this is not okay.
And you guys hadn't seek any kind of treatment or anything looking into it at that point? No,
it was still kind of. At that point, we'd been to like the pediatrician, like you would.
Yeah.
The pediatrician just said, "Oh, we'll
keep an eye on it."
Yeah. And then we ended up going to orthopedist. Because we thought his body hurt. Mm-hmm. So the orthopedist did some tests to rule out like cancer, God forbid, and stuff like that.
Sure.
And then they did all kinds of scans and they really couldn't find anything. And for a time they thought he might have juvenile arthritis.
Yeah.
Okay. Which is a significant thing. And so we thought that's what he had. And so we did all kinds of things like we got a pool because we thought the only thing he'd be able to do was swim. Because if you have juvenile arthritis, that's all you can do for physical activity. It's the best thing you can do. It's like least impact on your joints. Mm-hmm. So anyway, over the course of several months with really no treatment, his joint pain went away. And so little by little, all of a sudden he's fine. And now he's running around like normal.
And what's the time span there from when he first started complaining?
This is probably like 4 or 5 months.
Okay.
All of a sudden he feels much better.
Yeah.
But he had lab work done during then and nothing had come up?
Right. So we had lab work done, and we were just doing routine follow-ups.
Okay.
Nothing crazy. So every once a month we'd go over this time and we do lab work, which at the time is traumatic. I mean, he's 7 years old. And lab work for a 7-year-old is like really traumatic. You're getting stuck with a needle. Mm-hmm. And so he's feeling really better, but we have these routine follow-ups. And then one day we go for a routine follow-up and we get a phone call like 2 hours later being like, you need to take Jesse to the emergency room. And we said, why? And they said, we can't explain it over the phone. You need to go to the emergency room like right now. So
the fuck?
We get in the car, we drive down to the emergency room, and you guys and Daniel know, or you guys will both know this especially. Mm-hmm. So I walk in, when I tell my name, the triage person says, come straight to the back. So we know from experience that that's a really bad sign.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
So, because there was 500 people in the waiting room like there always are.
Yeah.
And anytime you're getting walked right to the back.
Doctors have been talking to each other.
And it's not because I'm a fire department or anything like that. This is straight, Sakharov, right to the back. So we go and it turned out that he was in liver failure.
Oh, wow.
So we get put in there and.
Was he feeling bad at this point?
At this point, he wasn't really feeling He had no symptoms.
Yeah.
Like at the time they called us and said, come to the ER right now, he was totally normal.
Normal.
Wow.
But they showed us his numbers.
Yeah.
So he was in Miller's Children's for that time. And you would look at his numbers and he was like 5,000 times over the normal limits.
Wow.
For liver irritation.
Sure. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so they said they tested him for everything, every disease, every infection, anything that would cause your liver to go into failure. And they could find nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And so he was on the point. He was hour by hour on the list to get a liver transplant.
Wow.
To the point where the fire department was going to send the helicopter to pick him up and fly him out. So they were on standby. I was on standby with Air Ops because they said, you call us and we're going to be there in 10 minutes.
Yeah, man. That's one of the good things about the fire department. When things like this happen, they really do go above and beyond to help, members like that.
Yep.
God, how now as a father and your wife obviously too, how frightening is that to the not knowing?
It was terrifying, it was terrifying. And, we didn't know, how it was going to turn out. And by that time I was really lucky because I was with you guys at 63s. Yeah. And, one of the things I was thinking about is the special part of being on the fire department. And I tell this to the new guys is you're a part of a family from the second you walk in. And people don't really understand what that means. They think it's, from a TV show or whatever, but we really are family.
Yeah.
And when you're hurting, your family steps in. And I just the amount of support we got from the second all this happened to us, so guys were showing up at the hospital and there was a stack of Legos next to the bed for Jesse. When he got bored of one, there was another one to do. And, the guys were coming, the offering the helicopter, and it was just an unbelievable outpouring of support.
Right.
It was huge. So while we're hurting in that time,
sure,
knowing that we have that support around us for every other little thing, the Relief Association, amazing. Like, we didn't worry about any of that.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
All of that stuff was taken care of.
Takes a little bit of weight off.
It's huge.
Off your heart.
So at this point, he's in liver failure. The focus is to try to get a transplant, but they don't know what caused it. They're still working on trying to figure out the source.
Right.
And when you're in liver failure, you can go into multi-organ failure, system failure. So they're basically watching everything else.
Yes.
Worried about, because you don't know what can happen now because you don't know what caused the liver failure.
They were, but at the same time, it's like you don't want to do a liver transplant unless they know 100% that there's nothing, there is no infection that can resolve, or there is no something that they can treat, because there's no going back from a liver transplant.
Right.
So they were working on all that. And ultimately we got to the point where they said, we're not comfortable having you here anymore. You need to go to Children's, because it literally got that close where they thought if something turns when we wake up in the morning, we want him to be like at the place that has the operating table.
Yeah.
So
you were in the Miller's Children's Hospital though at that time, right?
Yeah.
So to go from one children's hospital to another children's hospital.
Yes.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah.
So that was terrifying. But we ended up going. Jesse didn't end up deciding he didn't want a helicopter ride. So we were able to ask them if we could just do the ambulance, and they said okay.
Yeah.
We almost called you guys out, but we didn't end up doing it.
I remember a lot of phone calls and shit going on in the front office trying to get the approval for it all.
So we ended up going to CHLA, and we were there for about a month, maybe 6 weeks. And again, Julie showed up, and so Julie Wolf is one of the best firefighters in the history of our fire department. I won't mind saying it. She's done a lot of amazing things for us, but one of the things she did, we went to when we were in Children's, it was right around Christmas time.
Yeah.
So she and 35 showed up and essentially filled Jesse's room with toys.
Oh, wow.
It was like, to the point where, the doctors came in and were like, you might need to move some of this stuff because we might need to work and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
So other kids would walk by and they'd be like,
what the hell?
Wow. It's like Santa came early to that room.
Yeah. Yeah, Julie's awesome, man.
Yeah.
She was a guest on the show early on. She's
Okay.
one of the early guests. But if you guys are interested to hear her story, go back amazing person,
Episode
great
13.
friend,
Yeah,
good,
great episode.
amazing engineer. Yeah, all the way around.
So anyway, so we're there for 6 weeks, and then at the last 3 weeks we're there, nothing's happening.
Yeah.
So his liver didn't end up going to the point where he needed a liver transplant, but they weren't doing anything to fix it. He was taking no medicine. There's really not a whole lot of things that they can do for your liver at that point. Like there's no medicines or anything else.
Without knowing what the cause was or what's going on. Yeah.
So eventually he kind of stabilized to the point where they said, okay, well, you can go home as long as you're being closely followed. So we left, and then we went home, and then he started to feel better. And then every week his liver numbers would come down and down and down to the point they were almost good.
Mm-hmm.
So now again, we think, okay, like we're finished.
The worst is behind us.
Okay. Yeah. And then, same thing. We're at home. We get a phone call. You need to bring Jesse to the emergency room right now. And we're like, for what? And they say, you need to do it. And at this point, I'm burnt out.
Yeah.
Because I'm already like, I thought I was at the end of my rope for what we had already dealt with.
Sure, yeah.
I was like, I'm not doing it. And then the doctor, so the senior doctor, who's like the head of the program, gets on the phone and she goes, if it was my kid, I would get in the car right now. And I was like, okay, we'll be there, right? So,
yeah, sure, yeah.
So we go in, and now it turned out that Jesse's, all of his bloodlines had failed. So he had his red blood cells. He had no red blood cells, he had no white blood cells, and he had no platelets. So the 3 parts of your blood that you need to survive were all like critically low.
Whoa.
Mm-hmm.
So if your platelets get too low, you can't clot.
Yeah.
But when they get to the point where they're critically low, you'll actually get bleeding in your brain. Because the platelets, a minimum level of platelets keep the blood flowing in your brain as opposed to like seeping into your brain.
Yeah.
And your white blood cells keep you from getting infections, and your red blood cells keep you alive.
Yeah. Oxygen.
Once they go down to a certain point, your heart gets so stressed from the lack of oxygen that your heart will fail.
Yeah.
So all of his bloodlines had failed.
Whoa, man.
And
and still he felt okay
well,
at that point?
He felt okay up to the, up to the point of like once it failed, it failed hard.
Okay,
like it doesn't fail gradually. Like it failed and it went to nothing. So he goes in, he starts getting blood transfusions. So again, we're like, well, what's happening now? So about a week into the hospital, the day before, I remember this, I'm basically an amateur hematologist at this point.
Right.
Yeah.
Because I've read so many medical journals.
Oh, yeah.
That now when I speak to a hematologist, I'm like, I've read that study.
Yeah.
I've read that journal. Like he's going to quote at me. I can quote him back the facts of that study.
Sure.
So I remember the night before sitting in that hospital room reading, and I read that he had aplastic anemia, because there's a subset of aplastic anemia that you get after your liver fails. And I'm reading this medical journal, and I'm looking at the chart, and I'm looking at him, and I'm thinking of our story, and I go, this is what he has. But I'm also reading about how horrible it is, and I'm like, so the next day the doctor calls us into a conference room, and I know right away. And I'm like, that's what he has. He has aplastic anemia.
Did you bring it up to them, or did they bring it up to you?
No, this was the meeting where they were supposed to lay out what he has.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting in there, and it's him, and he's got like the grief counselor guy and my wife and I, and we sit down. He's like, well, we did all the results. We did all the analysis. And I said, he's got aplastic anemia, right? And the doctor says, yes.
Aplastic anemia. What is the mortality rate of this condition?
So aplastic anemia, it's extremely rare. Most people associate it with cancer. So about 100 people a year get aplastic anemia in America. The mortality rate is kind of based on, your age group.
Okay.
And how sick you are with other conditions.
Right.
So it's not necessarily the aplastic anemia that can kill you. It's usually the associated things that go along with it.
Sure.
But it's
and did you say it was a byproduct of the liver failure? Is that how it developed?
So basically the layman's explanation, as it turns out in this whole scenario, is that Jesse's immune system basically went crazy.
Yeah.
And so his immune system, as it turns out, for usually what happened was, or so much as the doctors think, you get an infection. It could be something mild, like a bad cold.
Yeah.
And when your body reacts to that cold, the immune system doesn't say, okay, we got that cold, we're done with our job, let's go take a nap.
Yeah.
It says, let's find somebody else to fight.
Yeah.
And so originally what it did was it attacked his joints. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So then when it
That's
attacked
the body pain.
exactly.
Yeah.
So then when it finished attacking his joints, it kind of said, well, we're done beating up the joints. Let's go find another fight. And then attacked his liver.
Yeah.
So then when it finished with his liver, it went after his bone marrow. And so your bone marrow is what produces all your blood.
Sure.
So his immune system killed his bone marrow.
Mm.
And that's what aplastic anemia really is. It's an immune dysfunction disease.
And the treatment for that, the ultimate treatment or definitive treatment is a bone marrow transplant.
So
right?
There's two ways to treat aplastic anemia. The first way is they give you a course of medical treatment of medications that reboots your immune system.
Yeah.
And the thought is that it destroys your immune system. And then it's similar to shocking somebody in AFib, right? If you shock them,
hoping it starts up again normal,
right? Yeah. So it's like that. So you reboot your immune system, and when it comes back online, maybe it's normal now and everything's okay. So they do that first because a bone marrow transplant, in the same way as a liver transplant, is very definitive. There's no going back from that. Sure. They don't like to do that unless they have to, because if it fails, you're going to die.
Yeah. Nothing else you can do. Yeah.
So they don't really like to do that unless they have to. So for Jesse, we did the medication first. And the medication worked on a very small level for Jesse. So he was still transfusion dependent, but not as when it first happened to him, he was producing nothing.
Yeah.
So he was getting platelets every 2 or 3 days, and he was getting red blood cells every week.
Wow.
And just to give you an example of how he lived, like you and I are walking around, like our red blood cell level is like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
Right. So for Jesse, 6 is critical. That's when your heart starts to suffer. So they would wait till he got to 6, and they would give him a transfusion, and that just brought him up to 8.
Oh man.
So that whole year, they would give him transfusions so that way he would like top him up. They would call it top him up for a holiday. So if it was Christmas, they'd top him up like the Wednesday before Christmas.
Yeah.
But that brought him to an 8.
Poor kid.
So he's living his life as an 8, and we're all walking around at a 13 or a 14.
Man.
All right.
And how's he handling all this at this? I mean, he's 7, 8 years old.
He's handling it like he's the toughest person I know. I mean, I don't know, as much as I wanted to take it from him.
Yeah.
I mean, he went through things that, even in the course of the things, all the testing, I mean, he had 4 liver biopsies. He had 6 bone marrow biopsies. He had countless MRIs and CTs. And, when you're a little kid, all of those are terrifying.
Terrifying.
One of them.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
He's been stuck 200 times, if that, if not more than that. So, we all think about taking your kid to the doctor for his, yearly vaccination, and your kid's like, Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he did all of that. So
was he, you guys kept him fully aware of everything that was going on, the diagnoses, all that stuff, or did you hold any of that back?
No, for the most part, we had to, because he lived his life. So Jesse was in and out of hospitals basically the whole time. So our whole life was, this was pre-COVID, right? So Jesse's worn a mask for 4 years, 3-4 years, going back to when he first got sick, because his immune system was varied between he had to be hospitalized for his own safety, or it was just barely good enough to be out in the real world, as long as he wore a mask and didn't go around anybody who was sick.
Right.
So for years, if we even left the house, Jesse, when he met another kid like on the playground or somewhere, he'd be like, "Have you been sick recently?"
Yeah.
Like a little adult. And the kid would be like,
guy.
"I don't know. I got my finger in my nose," right?
Yeah.
Jesse would be like, "I'm going to go play with that other kid."
Yeah.
And so we would just wait, and we get these phone calls saying, "Oh, sorry, his number dropped below 500. That was his criteria."
Mm-hmm.
So that's neutrophils. That's your body's ability to fight off infection.
Yeah.
So if he went under 500, in the hospital. And so we get these phone calls every, week, 2 weeks in the hospital. And then we'd stay 2 or 3 days, however long it took to hopefully go back up. And so again, fire department family, I'd get these phone calls at work. And I had guys coming in from home. I had guys coming back from vacation, because in the fire department, your seat has to be filled. You can't just leave.
Yeah.
Because if you leave, your fire engine get closed, and that, that's the community that you swore to help.
Yeah.
So I had guys, paramedics jumping in my seat. I had all kinds. I had captains jumping in my seat. It was unbelievable the amount of support I got.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jesse, during that time, was transfusion dependent, And going back to your original question about the bone marrow transplant, just as an aside, typically it's actually the transfusions that kill you if you have aplastic anemia. So the Bubble Boy, you know the movie with the Bubble Boy?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
The Bubble Boy had aplastic anemia. So people don't know that. They just think, he had some weird, thing. So the Bubble Boy had aplastic anemia, and the Bubble Boy in real life that was based on, he actually died of iron overload. He didn't actually die of an infection.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Because your body cannot tolerate iron overload or too many transfusions. When you get iron from someone else's blood, your body can't process it. And so every time you get a transfusion, it adds
piles
more
up,
iron.
adds up, huh?
And so eventually your body can't tolerate that,
Wow.
and then your organs do fail.
Man.
So it's the transfusions.
Just so we're clear, too, Boy in the Bubble is the John Travolta one, right?
Yeah.
Bubble Boy is Jake Gyllenhaal,
Yes.
right? Bubble Boy. Have you ever seen Bubble
I have
Boy?
not
It
seen
is.
Bubble Boy.
Okay,
Yeah.
you got to watch Bubble Boy.
Okay.
Just everyone out there in the podcast
Bubble
world.
Boy's like 20 years ago, right?
Yeah, go watch
Yeah.
Bubble Boy.
Yeah.
I knew what you were talking about, but when you watch Bubble Boy,
Yes.
you'll get what I'm talking about. Yeah, man, so many different ways that he could be affected by this thing, man.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And now, so this was all happening pre-COVID.
This was all happening pre-COVID. So right around a few months before COVID, we had done this so we did the medication, and about a year later, they like to give the medication. They don't necessarily give it a certain amount of time because a bone marrow transplant is no going back. But about a year into that, it was clear the medication wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
He was still getting, his transfusions were more spread out, but he was still getting transfusions, and his levels were.
It wasn't the fix-all. It wasn't the end of the
He
road.
was kind of just going along like at a very low level.
Yeah.
And his quality of life was really low. And at any time, if it went under that, then we were going to get a transplant anyway.
Yeah.
So finally, the doctor said, "You're going to need a bone marrow transplant."
This is after a year now?
This is about a year.
Okay.
But this is where the story gets crazy. So when we first got diagnosed, they say, okay, these are the two courses of actions: the medication and the bone marrow transplant.
Yeah.
Now, in America, they always do the medication first because of the risks of the bone marrow transplant.
Mhm.
In some other parts of the world, they actually do transplants first.
Yeah.
But here they say, okay, we're going to do this. But they tell you if we had to do a bone marrow transplant, because even if they do the medication, if it doesn't work at all and you're
Mhm.
really, really bad, they'll go to transplant. They don't have to wait a year or
Yeah.
6 months. So they said when they first did it, they said, well, the other thing is we did a preliminary search and Jesse doesn't have any matches.
Mm.
So that's a big problem.
Sure.
You
Right.
can't get a bone marrow transplant when you have no match.
And there's a
Right.
national registry
So there's a
of,
national,
of potential donors out there too, right?
national and international.
International.
Yeah.
Okay.
So they did this preliminary search and there were no candidates that matched Jesse. So that was even more reason that we had to do the medication. So now fast forward a year, they say, okay, now we have to do a bone marrow transplant. And we say, okay. And they said, we're going to do a search. So they do a search and they say we have one person
Oh,
who's
wow.
a perfect match. Completely perfect in every way. There's 10 different factors.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And this person was a 10 out of 10. It was the only person on the entire planet.
Oh my
And they
God.
were located in Germany.
Wow.
Wow.
So they say, we're going to call him and we're going to ask him if he's willing to donate.
Yeah, and that's interesting too, man, because I'm on the registry, right? But originally I got on the registry because when we were graduating from the academy, somebody came and talked to us about it, and I was like, "Oh shit, I'll do that," And you put yourself on there, and then you don't hear anything. You know what I mean? Like I've been on, almost 18 years on the job, and just haven't matched. But I could get a phone call today. Hey, this is such and such from Be the Match, or and you're a match for somebody in Germany or something like that. So how does that work? So they call and they have to obviously give permission, agree to do this thing.
So they call, and that was the longest 2 weeks of my life.
Oh
The
man.
idea that there was one person in another country who had never met me, and he had the ability to save my son's life. Because if he says no, the medicine's failed. They told us the medicine wasn't going to work.
Yeah.
He's still transfusion dependent.
And you don't know who it is. It's not like you
No,
can go
there's
or
no-
contact
Yeah, no
them
way
and
to
plead your
convince
case or
him.
anything
Yeah.
like that.
It was a 30-year-old 30-year-old guy in Germany
Oh, wow.
who is, doesn't know us, might not know any Americans, might not speak English. And they call this person and they say, do you want to save some kid's life on the other side of the world that you've never met? You want to take time out of your busy schedule to do that?
Wow.
So they call me 2 weeks later and they say the guy said yes.
Oh, my God, dude.
Wow.
Can't even imagine.
That's crazy. That's what it comes
Oh,
down to
God.
at the end after this whole year-long road. And it's like, okay, this random dude.
It's to this day, like, I can't even explain it to people. Like, I don't know why. I only hope, if you're a karma person, I only hope that the things that I've tried to do to help other people, or that my friends have tried to do to help other people, like, I'd give it all up for that moment that man saved my son's life.
Yeah, man.
So
Crazy.
yeah,
Shit.
he donated. So he donated his cells. He actually donated bone marrow, and which is not like a significant operation. Some people think it's like donating an organ. It's not. They just take a little bone marrow out, like with a syringe, and it's like a little IV bag.
Yeah.
Super
Yeah.
tiny.
Yeah.
How
does that work? Did they fly him over here, or did they
No,
do it
so
in Germany and ship it out?
They do it in Germany. Typically, they like to do it live, or I'm not sorry, live. They like to do it fresh. So typically, they'll take it and then they'll fly it directly over, and within a day, Jesse would get it. But because of COVID, this was all happening right around COVID.
Yeah.
So I'm watching the news, and so right before his transplant, I say to his doctor, before we got in the hospital, and I said, "Doctor, what about this thing on TV about this thing everyone's talking about?" He's like, "Don't worry about it." He's like, "Let's just do it." Okay.
Yeah.
So we go in the hospital, and it had turned out that because of all those delays, the option B, if they don't do it fresh, is they freeze it.
Mm-hmm.
So the guy donated it in Germany, and then they freeze it, they fly it over here, and then it just sits in a freezer until we use it.
Yeah.
So that's what we did for Jesse. And but we went in the hospital Monday, and I think the lockdown was on Wednesday. Because I remember our room in CHLA overlooked that Ralph's, there on Sunset.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the parking lot, and that it was always crazy there.
Yeah.
And then like the third day, no cars.
Empty.
And
Yeah.
it's like you look out at like 9:00 in the morning, you're like, that's weird.
Yeah.
Turn on the news, COVID lockdowns.
Man.
So,
And obviously, when you have any kind of transplant or anything, you're immunosuppressed, and obviously a bone marrow transplant, you're completely immunosuppressed.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, we were locked down. He had like an airlock room,
Yeah.
with like,
Yeah.
think of the Alien movie where you got the airlock
Mhm.
to
Sure,
get
yeah.
in and all that. So
So everyone he saw was always like full ISO gowns.
it was
and
full
everything,
ISO.
and-
Everything was like super careful.
Jeez.
And so how long after the actual transplant was that kind of scaled back a little bit? Like when do you know for sure that it's like taking hold and your body's reacting properly?
So when you're there, they have a little chart, and they do your blood work every day, because at that point he had a central line. So, they would just pull blood out whenever they wanted and tested it. And they have a little chart on the wall, it's got like a little like Pokemon on it. Because, it's silly that, you're looking at, the blood charts, it's going to save your life. But if you put a smiley face and a Pokemon on it, it's great.
Yeah, little gold star.
So they chart that, and then it takes about 10 days to 2 weeks till cells start growing. So
Mhm.
essentially a bone marrow transplant, again, for the recipient, people are like, oh, was the operation hard for Jesse? I go, he was sitting there like watching TV, and they hang an IV bag,
Yeah.
and it just goes in, and then it finds its way to the bone marrow and just repopulates. And so that was it. So 2 weeks later, all of a sudden, all those zeros started to go 001, 001, 002.
Wow.
And then they just grew from there. So it
Man.
took we were in the hospital for about 6 weeks before his numbers stabilized to the point that we can go home.
Wow.
Yeah.
So just for those first 2 weeks, you have no idea if it's going to take, if it found it, if
Yes.
it's going to work.
And what are
after
the
everything you went through?
what are the odds that your body rejects?
It's less so much odds. It's really more, it's the infection period, like exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
It's that time when you're at zero.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Anything
Anything
can
gets you.
get
Yeah.
you. Any
Yeah.
cold, any,
Right.
so
And
No.
it's right at the beginning of the worst pandemic. And
well, there's that, which is terrifying. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I remember, you and I, we've had, tons of preceptors, or we've been preceptors. We've had tons of interns.
Sure.
So, you watch your interns, do everything. And sometimes you're like, I'm going to let this guy make a mistake because, he's still learning. It's not going to hurt anybody, but I want to see what he does.
I'm in the middle of that right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm in that hospital room and they'd bring in like a nurse trainee. I'm like, nope.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Go train on someone else. They're like,
Yep.
"But this is-" I said, I'm sorry. I get it. I don't want to be that guy. I go, but he's at 0. Get out.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah.
So,
and you have to, you have to advocate.
Mm-hmm.
so stuff like that where you just got to keep them. It was very scary for that. So that's really the time that's the most scary. And then the other part of the transplant that's scary is there's something called graft versus host disease. That's where your body, just like you guys probably think about with an organ transplant, is it's foreign matter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And your body doesn't like foreign matter.
Yeah.
And if your body thinks it's foreign matter, it's going to attack it.
Sure.
Right.
And then for people who get bone marrow transplants, after that initial period, if they make that,
Yeah.
the second danger is graft versus host disease. And so that can be really bad. It can affect it attacks your skin, your internal organs, your digestive tract. But having a match usually mitigates that.
Sure.
So like having
a perfect match like that
match,
too.
right.
Yeah.
Because what is a threshold like that would constitute a match worthy of actually doing a transplant?
It really depends on if you're going to die or not.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
severity.
So,
Yeah.
I mean, they'll go down to 5 out of 10,
Yeah.
but it depends. For Jesse, he had radiation and chemo because before you get your new cells, they give you radiation and chemotherapy to completely annihilate anything that was left because he was diseased, and sick.
Right.
So he got a lot of that. So when you so bone marrow transplants 20 years ago were super intense. The radiation and the chemo basically almost killed you.
Yeah.
And then they would give you your new cells. And a lot of times you'd survive, but the radiation and the chemo was so hard on your body that you'd have a lot of other problems.
Yeah.
Right.
And now it's better where they can give you just enough.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But if they go dip below that, it gets more intense. But
Wow.
it depends on, where you are in the course of your treatment.
How's Jesse doing now?
Jesse is doing amazing. He's what I just tell people, he's a regular kid.
Normal kid
He's
now.
playing ice hockey. He's, going to school.
Does he still go back regularly for blood work and stuff like that, or is that going kind of scaling back now too since he's doing
So his
well?
last checkup he did, his last checkup was in March. It was his 2-year anniversary, and he is now on yearly checkups.
Wow.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah,
Was
so
there
awesome.
was there a period after you guys first came out of the hospital when everything was back up where you were still just kind of on edge for a while, just not knowing if anything was going to turn again, change?
I mean, I'm in a constant state of PTSD.
Yeah.
So,
Can
going
imagine.
through that, and I'm really fortunate because he's going through that thing now where he doesn't know if he identifies as a kid who used to be sick or a regular kid.
Yeah.
Sometimes he's like, I don't want people to look at me like a sick kid.
Yeah.
But he's also like, but I don't want to dismiss something I went through that was really hard that I did. Whereas, and I'm glad, like when we went to that appointment a few weeks ago, I said, oh, remember that nurse? She was really nice to you. And he goes, Dad, I don't remember that nurse. And I was like, good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas for me, I remember all of it. I remember all, so I'm constantly afraid, even though his numbers have been really good for a while, every time we go to one of those, I live in fear.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
hopefully it'll fade, but it's
Yeah,
your kid.
it's got to be. Yeah.
I want
Can't even
to
imagine.
I want to take a moment and for those that are listening that have followed me and followed the 63's page for a while, you probably remember me posting about Jesse and the Be the Match drive, and the response to that was huge. So everybody that responded to that and actually got on the registry and stuff like that, I just want to, I've said it before, I'll say it again. Thank you all for going out of your way to do that, to try to help Jesse. The response was huge for Roger and his family and for Be the Match across the board. And somebody like you in Germany that probably just happened to say, hey, I'll do this,
Yeah.
wound up saving a life. So if you guys, like I said before, you most likely register on Be the Match and then you forget about it. You forget that you even did it. So if it ever comes up, that you get a phone call that you are a match for somebody anywhere in the world, I hope that you remember this whole story and just how important it is to go through with something like that if you're a match for somebody, and how much it can change somebody's life or save somebody's life.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if I could add to that, really the reason I'm here today is because I'm not really like much of a camera or media person, despite my past as a media person.
Yeah.
But part of the reason I'm here today is because Gons has done so much for me. When you're in that, going through that fight of your life, you're just focused on the fight in front of you, right?
Yeah.
You don't see
Right.
anything around you. You're focused on the fight in front of you.
Of course.
And Gons did so much for me in raising awareness and getting us into that cycle of getting people signed up. Because at the point where we had no match, we just thought we were hopeless and we didn't know what we were going to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And everything he did for us, that push in the beginning when I needed help, and he saw that I needed help, and he saw that I couldn't do it for myself, and he stepped in and got a lot of that going, all of the social media stuff. And I remember we did our pancake breakfast, and he was doing all that stuff to get all those people signed up. And again, going back to Julie, because I was trying to do these events and people were pushing me. And I remember I went to one, I started to do the drill tower recruits. And I remember the first one, and I almost canceled because I couldn't do it. And Julie said, "I'll go with you. I'll just do it. You just stand there."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, "Okay," because I just needed it. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't want to go there and not be able to talk. And we go, and I was able to talk, and Julie just stood there and helped me out. And it turned out she had driven all the way from San Diego for that. It was her day off. I didn't even know. I thought maybe she came from work, or it was convenient, or she was working that day and got detailed. But she drove 200 miles just to stand next to me for 10 minutes to get people signed up.
Yeah, man.
And so that support when I needed it, when I couldn't do it myself, I don't know how I would have done it without it. And since then, we've signed up. I think we're almost up to 1,000 people signed up.
Wow.
It's awesome.
And more importantly, going back to what Danny was saying, we've had 6 people who were matches
Wow.
Oh, wow.
just from us, because they can track, who signs up
Right.
in the URLs.
Right.
So we've had 6 people that were like that guy in Germany, and there could be 6 people now that are walking around, people that, loved ones, or because you, like you said, you get that call, no matter how busy you are that day, and they'll work with you.
Yeah.
But you get that phone call, it's so important to return it, because it's really easy to donate. It's the easiest life you'll ever save. And there's 6 people walking around on top of Jesse because of you and Julie and everybody, what everybody did.
Yeah.
And from you too. Yeah.
Well, Roger, I love you, buddy.
I love you too, man.
This whole story and, going through this and watching you go through this, the emotional roller coaster that it was, from heartbreak to being elated that he got the transplant and everything. I'm just so happy that he's doing so much better and he's back to being a normal kid. In all this, also you promoted to inspector as well, with everything that was going on, and how great is it to have this extra time to be actually home more and stuff like that with your family after going through a big ordeal like this?
Yeah, it's amazing. I sought the position because at the time, he was still in the middle of all this medical stuff. And I thought, everyone said, oh, this will be a better position for you to go to his medical appointments and to go to his treatments and everything else. Yeah. And I thought, oh, that's a really good reason to study and work towards this. But thankfully now that he's doing less of that,
yeah,
I agree. Like I'm trying to give him back all that time. So like our family now lives like, he's like, I want to go snowboarding. I go, let's do it.
Let's go.
I want to go to Disneyland. Do it.
Yeah.
So that's what we do now. We're trying to live 3 years and as much time as he wants.
I think that's a great lesson, a little tidbit to end on, man, is you never know what is going to happen in this life, especially working in this career. How many people have we known that have passed on the line of duty? You never know, man, what's going to happen, and you have to be happy in life.
Yes.
And if you're not happy, you need to make a change, man. It's never too late to turn around if you're going down the wrong road. If you're, writing stories for a sports team and you just feel like it's not for you, there's nothing wrong with stopping and going, I choose to be happy, and I'm going to pick a different route that's going to make me happy.
Yeah.
Raj, thank you so much for coming and talking to us.
Yeah.
I know it's difficult to talk about a story like that, man, but I think the whole story together is good for people to hear. and especially if they're ever put in a position where they have the potential of being a donor and saving a life.
Totally.
Is there anything that you want to is there a website or anything that people can go to if they do want to get on the registry and are just hearing about it now for the first time?
So you just want to go to bethematch.org, and it's really simple. Pretty much any page from that, you just click, you put in your address. They're going to mail you a Q-tip, and it takes seconds. Just swab yourself. You slap it back in the mail. You drop it in the post office. They don't keep it. It's not 23andMe. If you sign up for 23andMe, it's not Be the Match.
Yeah.
So go ahead and do Be the Match, please. Get signed up on that registry, and if they call you, please donate.
It is really is simple, guys. Everyone in the family got one at home. You swab your cheek, you put it back in, you send it off, and that's it. You forget about it.
Yeah, we'll put a link on our Instagram and YouTube and everything when we post this as well.
For sure.
Yeah.
Thanks again for coming out, man. Really appreciate it. You guys can follow me at DannyGonzo34 on Instagram and Twitter.
Yeah, you can follow me at Ben9Humor, Ben9Humor on Instagram and Twitter. Follow the show at PRC Pod on Instagram and Twitter, or PRC Podcast on TikTok. This show really had it all.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, this is why people love it. We have guests on. We got a great story, a reunion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And we got proof to the audience that Danny puts his money where his mouth is. You know what I mean? It's not just him talking about Fire Family. The guy steps up, does a thing or two. You know what I mean?
Sometimes
we
they do good things.
We made a difference here.
And we will have the Shopify account up here in the next couple of days to get for you guys to be able to order some PRC merch.
Yes, and if you do want your shirts autographed, let us know. People have been asking, and all right, we'll do it.
Well, for a small fee.
Yeah, it ain't cheap.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. We'll see you.
Thank you.